Here I'm going to talk about multi-protocol BGP, and we'll go over its configuration and verification. So what's new? What's different about MP-BGP versus just BGP as we've been used to it? Specifically, it adds functionality for other protocols, and we're going to work today with both IPv4 and IPv6. It adds an address family identifier and two optional non-transitive attributes, an MP reachability NLRI attribute, which describes route reachability, and an MP unreachable NLRI attribute, which withdraws a specific or an IPv6 route from service. The rest of the routing protocol functionality and rules are the same. Still uses port 179, still makes path selection decisions the same way. So all those other things are just the same. We've just added a few things. We've added some functionality to it. A couple things to know. The IPv4 address family is activated by default. We need to activate the IPv6 address family. Neighbors have to be activated. And if we're only running IPv6 on the router, then the router ID has to be configured. Because if you remember, a router ID is in a dotted decimal format. If it's not specifically configured, it's derived from the highest loopback address or the highest physical active IP address. And so if we're not running IPv4, then we have to specify the router ID. So what are our commands to configure this? We have to start the BGP router process using the router BGP autonomous system number command. Then we specify our neighbors using the neighbor command. We start a specific address family using the address family AFI, SAFI. That stands for address family identifier and subsequent address family identifier. So that would be like IPv4 unicast or IPv6 unicast or multicast, or that's what these two would be. Then we have to activate our neighbors for an address family using the neighbor command activate. And lastly, we need to advertise our networks using the network mask command. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's look at our topology. So here's the topology I've built, pretty basic, just 3 routers, each of them in a different autonomous system. I've already configured the IPv4 and IPv6 addresses everywhere. I've configured loopbacks on each of the routers just to give us more networks to work with so we can see the results. That's the only reason for the loopbacks. So let's go ahead and we're going to start configuring. We'll start with configuring KC. Then I'll configure KC, then I'll configure AZ, and then we'll go up and we'll configure ISP. I don't know, maybe I'll go in order. We'll see. Anyway, let's go ahead and configure KC. I'm going to go grab my terminal window. All right, so we have a window over. Let's go ahead and start with configuring BGP and KC. Now remember I said I've already configured all the IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, so we just have to start with BGP. The autonomous system number is 64501, so we want to first get into the router BGP. Right? So router BGP and our autonomous system number, 64501. And then next we've got to specify our neighbors. We do that under the routing process, not under the address family. We activate them under the address family. So neighbor, and my neighbor for this is going to be the ISP link here. It's going to be the ISP IPv4 and IPv6 address. I just moved this over again. So our neighbors then will be 192.168.1.2 and 2001 DB81::2. So these are the neighbors for KC. Sorry, not trying to make you motion sick here. All right, neighbor 192.168.1.2, remote AS, and that autonomous system, ISP's autonomous system is 64500. And neighbor 2001:DB8:1:2 remote AS, again, still 64500, it's just IPv4 and IPv6. So now we've created our neighbors. We got to go into the address family and activate them. going to do a tab completion. So whenever you see the extra, I start it and then it goes and it finishes, that just means I hit tab to complete the command. Remember, if you have enough of the command typed in that the iOS knows or has no other option. So as I got this part typed in, the only other option was address-family, so you can tab complete it then. IPv4. Actually, I'll show you. I remember I said there was had support for multiple protocols, but we were going to focus on IPv6 as our new protocol here. But if you hit a question mark here, you can see then what was added. These are our address family identifiers. And we are going to use IPv4 right now. Move that over, sorry. And if I hit a question mark, I see my subsequent address family identifiers. We're going to focus just on unicast here. And actually unicast, I'll type it in now. Unicast is the default, so you don't necessarily have to type it in. Now let's go ahead and activate our neighbors. So neighbor 192.168.1.1.2 activate. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. And I'm going to take each of these step by step. So I'm not going to advertise the networks just yet, even though it's going to seem like more steps. And the rest of them, maybe I'll put them all under the same one, but I'm going to focus on the first things, right? So the first thing was enable BGP. Then specify our neighbors in the routing process. Then go into our address families and activate those neighbors, and then after that we'll advertise our networks. So I'm going to go into address family, IPv6. Remember I said we don't have to have unicast because it is the default. Neighbor is 2001:db8:1:2 activate. Now since I'm in this address family now, I'll stay in here and we'll go ahead and specify our networks. We're going to advertise our internal networks, so we're going to advertise the 2001 DB8.3 network and the 2001 DB8.4 network in the IPv6 process. So network was 2001 DB8:3:/64 and hit enter. I'm just going to hit the up arrow to bring that command back and change this 3 to a 4 to specify this other network for loopback 1. Oh. All right, now we're going to go into address family IPv4 and specify those networks, the 10.10.1.1 and 10.10.2.1, or the 10.10.1.0 network and the 2.0 network. Network 10.10.1.0 space. For this we need a mask 255.255.255.0. Let me move my cursor out of the way again. Hit the up arrow, change the 1 to a 2 to advertise for the loopback 1. And now we've actually done everything we need to do for BGP on KC. You could specify a router ID. We don't have to because, again, we have IPv4 addresses and it will use the highest active loopback address, and then if that's not available, we'll use the highest active physical interface address as its router ID. But if you were to configure router ID, that's in the router BGP process. So I could do, if I exit back, I'm in the router BGP process, not in the address family. You can tell because of this versus this address family specification. This is where you would do, whoops, it's got to be BGP. BGP router ID, and then you can go ahead and specify whichever router ID you want. Maybe you want 1.1.1.1, that's pretty common, or 10.10.10.10. It's like totally up to you, however you want to specify it. That's how you would go ahead and do it. I'm not going to specify it because I do have IPv4 addresses and that works for me. So Casey is done. Let's go ahead and we'll just configure ISP up here. So if we look at it again real quick, we have two neighbors now. We're going to have KC as a neighbor, so we'll have to do the 192.168.1.1 and the 2001 DB 81::1, and then we'll do 192.168.2.2 and 2001 DB 8 2::2 for Arizona down here, AZ. All right, so move this back over so you can see what we're doing. And ISP, enable config T. First thing is router BGP, the router BGP process. This autonomous system for, even though you can't see it, the autonomous system for this router here is 64500. So router BGP 64500. We go ahead and specify our neighbors. 192.168.1.1. Remote AS 64501 down here, 64501, and then neighbor 2001 DB8:1:1, and we just got our neighbor adjacency between KC and ISP and IPv4. 2001 DB8:, I just gotta make sure I read it right. Remote, that time it wasn't enough to tab completed. Remote AS 64501 again. Now let's go ahead and specify our neighbors for AZ, our connection to AZ. So we're on ISP, now we want to specify AZ as our neighbor. Neighbor 192.168.2.2. Remote AS is AZ's AS 65550, and neighbor 2001 DB8:2:2 remote AS 65550. There we go. Wow. All right, so we started the BGP process. We specified our neighbors. Now let's go into address family 4 and activate those neighbors, and then we'll also advertise the networks this time at the same time. Instead of going through the whole process individually, we'll do them at the same time this time. So pull this back over. We're going to go through, we're going to activate these neighbors. So we'll go through, we're going to activate, these are our neighbors, right? This is what we just configured. Now we'll go through and activate them and then advertise these networks. And we're done with that. We'll move on to AZ. All right, so I'll bring my ISP window back. Now let's go ahead and activate our neighbors and advertise our networks. So address family, we'll do IPv4 first. Neighbor 192.168.1.1 activate. And then we'll hit the up arrow and just change these 1s to 2s to specify then this neighbor over here. 2.2, whoops. All right, and we want to advertise the loopback addresses inside of ISP. So network, those are 10.10.3.0 space mask 255.255.255.0. The other one is 40, so just hit the up arrow and change that to 4. And now we can go ahead, let's go into the IPv6 address family. And activate those neighbors. DB8:1:1, activate, and we'll hit the up arrow and change these 1s to 2s. That will then activate right, the neighbor AZ over here. And then advertise our IPv6 loopback addresses, those extra, remember we just created the loopback, so we had some networks to simulate. So network 2001 colon DB8 colon, and that is 5 colon slash 64. Enter. Hit the up arrow. The other one is DB86 is the network. Whoops. All right, so we have configured router BGP. We've configured our neighbors and the remote AS that they're in. We've activated our neighbors for both IPv4 and IPv6, and we'd advertised our network. So I think that we're done with the ISP now. So now we'll move down here to the AZ. You probably don't need me to, you probably don't need me to tell you what to do next. Now we've done it twice, but we'll do it again. And then we'll do some verification commands. So we've got to configure multi-protocol BGP on AZ now. So we'll start again with the BGP routing process in Autonomous System 65550. Router BGP 65550. And our neighbor. We only have one neighbor here. Arizona's or AZ's only neighbor is ISP. So neighbor 192.168.2.1, remote AS 64.500 is the autonomous system ISP is in. Neighbor 2001, DB8. You can see our adjacency came up with our neighbor, so that's good. We've established our session. 2001 DB8 colon 2 colon 1. Remote AS 64.500. So now let's go ahead, activate our neighbors, and advertise our loopback networks. IPv4. IPv4 neighbor is 192.168.2.1. Activate, hit enter, and then our network. We have the 10.10.5 network and the 10.10.6 network here. 10.5.0 mask 255.255.255.0. Hit the up arrow. We'll change the 5 to a 6 so that we are advertising the network for loopback 1. And hit enter. Now we're going to go into the IPv6 address family and do the same thing, except for with our IPv6 addresses. Well, let's do our neighbor first, sorry. Neighbor 2001 DB8 colon 2 colon 1 and activate. And then our networks. So now we can see that our neighbor adjacency came up. 2001 colon, and just again our loopbacks on the inside, so 2001 DB87 and DB88. colon slash 64. We'll hit the up arrow, change this 7 to an 8 to specify the loopback. And we have now configured BGP, so let's do some verification. So we could check IPv4, so if we do a show IP BGP, we can see if we've got our networks, or we've learned networks from the other autonomous systems, and it looks like we have learned 10.1.1, or the 10.1 network, the 10.2 network that are on KC, the 10.3 and the 10.4, the next hop to get to them. 10.5 and 10.6 are in our table, that's our own. That's within our own autonomous system. When we're directly connected, when you see this quad 0 here for the next hop, you know that that's a directly connected network. So we'd also do a show IP route. And we can see we have BGP routes. That's what the B signifies here. If we scroll up a little bit, when you do a show IP route, you get the information here as well, so you know what the codes are. B stands for BGP. So these are our BGP routes that we've learned from our neighbors. show IPv6 route. We can see then our IPv6 BGP routes that we've learned. 3 and 4 over here. And you'll notice we're getting, it uses our link local address as the via, or how we're getting there. So that looks pretty good. You could do a show IPv6 unicast, show BGP IPv6 unicast. And this gives us the same information that show IPBGP did, except for it's for IPv6. And this is specifying the next hop address in this one. So how am I going to get to address 3 and 4 over here? By going through ISP, my ISP neighbor at 2001 DB82::1. We also, if we had attribute sets, these are at the defaults right now. You can see the path to get there. When we talk about the AS path attributes, in order to get to 2001 DB83, we've got to first go through Autonomous System 64500, which is the ISP's AS number, and then go to 64501, which is KC's AS number. So that's our AS path, or our path. What else? We could do show BGP let's see, I'm trying to think what I want to do specifically. Show BGP so let's just do a show IP BGP, and then we get a list of our paths. So then the next thing we can do is do a show BGP IPv4, and let's pick one. So we'll go 10.10.1.0 and then the subnet mask. Whoops. Oh, I know what I did. There we go. Now we can look at specific entries for this route. There's one path available to it, and that is going to be through 64500 AS and 645 to get to 64501. Here, if we have certain things that are set so we can see more of the attributes. And we could do the same thing for IPv6. I always forget the BGP part. Show BGP, IPv6. And we just take this right here. Just going to copy it. And go ahead and do a show BGP, IPv6. Unicast, whoops. And so we can get the specific information, the attribute information on the specific IPv6 route or network. And again, to get to that, because we know we got to go through ISP and KC. A local preference of 100 is the default, so we haven't changed that. So anyway, that is configuring BGP, multi-protocol BGP, and just some show commands. There are a ton more where you can just get a ton of information. Let's do one more thing. Let's go ahead and do a summary route and see how that behaves, because there are two different ways to do a summary route. We can do the default way and not add any keywords, or we can add the summary only keyword and see how that behaves. So let's do that real quick and then we're done. So I'm going to summarize these two loopbacks here just to make it easy. So we're going to summarize loopback 10.10.1.0 and 10.10.2.0 into one summary route. So upstream then it'll send an aggregate route and use that rather than the more specific routes. And that sometimes eliminates some flapping issues if you have a bunch of routes inside that you're advertising and you just have one that's flapping. We don't want the whole route removed. All we need to do is know how to get to KC and then let KC deal with what's happening internally. And it makes our routing tables smaller. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Switch to my tab. And the aggregate address command is going to be done under the address family. So we're going to just do these, we're just going to do the IPv4 loopbacks for this so we can finish up. So config T, router, BGP, 64501. Oops, spell router correctly. And then we got to go into the address family, IPv4, and we use the aggregate address command. So if you weren't sure how, basically what you can do to find the summary address is to take the addresses. In this case, I only have the two, the 10.10.1 and the 10.10.2. You could write them out bitwise, go to where they're the first time they're different, and put a line there, and those are all your bits that are going to be in your new address. So for me, my aggregate address, I'll tab complete that because it's long and I'll probably mess it up. The aggregate address for the 10.10.1 and the 10.10.2 is 10.10.0.0, and the new subnet mask is 22 bits. So it's going to be 255.255.252.0. We hit a space, we hit a question mark, we've got some keywords. The only one we're going to deal with today is going to be summary only, but we're not going to do that yet. We're just going to leave it alone for right now. And we're going to hit enter. And then we're going to go give it a second, and we're going to go up into the ISP. Looks like my ISP tab went away, so I'll have to start that up again. And we're going to verify that it is in fact getting our summary route upstream. Let's go into our ISP, show IP-BGP. Yes, and now we do see our summary route. What I also want you to notice is when you leave it the way it is and just do the aggregate address command, it also keeps or sends information about the addresses that are being aggregated. Right, so these are the component addresses that are being aggregated into this aggregate or summary address. And they're going to continue to show up in this table unless I do the summary only. So let's go back and add the summary only keyword and just verify that it behaves how we expected. So I'm going to go back. Luckily that tab stayed open so I can just click it. So we'll go, oh, wrong one, sorry, I got the wrong tab open. There we go. I'm just going to hit the up arrow and just add the keyword summary only and hit enter. And we'll get out of here. Then I just got to give it a moment to update, right? Because BGP's got to send its updates out. And in this time we do a show IP-BGP, our component addresses should be missing and we should only see our summary address for these loopbacks. Let's see if it updated yet. And it did. So now, if we go up here, without summary only, we saw the addresses contained in this summary address. With the keyword summary only, we only get the summary address itself. That's the only thing that's going into the BGP table here. Okay, that's it. That's multi-protocol BGP and summary address or the aggregate address configuration.